It was just another ordinary day at Riverside High School, or so everyone thought. Evelyn Moore, the janitor, was sweeping the halls like she always did. Her worn-out sneakers barely made a sound as she moved through the empty corridors, cleaning up after the chaos of the students. She had been working at the school for years. Day in and day out, she cleaned the same classrooms, the same bathrooms, and the same hallways, making sure everything was spotless. But no one ever noticed her. She wasn't just a janitor. She was a woman with a mind as sharp as a razor, hidden under the guise of an everyday worker. Evelyn had once been the brightest student in her class, a math prodigy who could solve calculus problems like they were simple puzzles. But life had a way of pushing her dreams aside, and now she was just another invisible face to the students and teachers. Then came the day that changed everything. Mr. Logan Brooks, the arrogant math teacher, had been in his classroom, showing off the complex problems on the whiteboard to his students. He liked to remind everyone how smart he was, how no one could touch his intellectual abilities. The students in the class were mostly rich kids, spoiled and entitled, and they ate up every word Mr. Brooks said. But that day, something in him shifted. He saw Evelyn walking by, her mop in hand, and a devious smile formed on his face. "Hey, Evelyn," he called out, loud enough for the entire class to hear. "Why don't you come up here and solve this one for us? You know, we could use a little bit of your janitorial genius." The class erupted into laughter. Logan thought it was a joke, and everyone else thought so too. It was the kind of joke that people like him enjoyed, especially when it was at the expense of someone like Evelyn. After all, she was just the janitor. She didn't belong in the same league as them, certainly not when it came to something as complicated as calculus. Evelyn stood still for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, waiting for her to react. But she said nothing. She didn't need to. With a slow and deliberate step, she walked to the front of the classroom. The chalk was cold in her hand as she gripped it, the sound of it scraping against the board echoing through the room. She glanced at the complicated problem Mr. Brooks had written, her eyes scanning the numbers and symbols with ease. The students watched in silence now, curiosity replacing their mocking smiles. Evelyn didn't say a word as she began solving the problem. Her hand moved quickly and confidently, drawing lines and symbols on the board, each calculation coming effortlessly as if she had been doing this all her life. The class was stunned. Mr. Logan Brooks stood frozen, unable to believe what he was seeing. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had expected her to struggle, maybe even fail. But instead, she was solving the problem faster than he could follow along. When she finished, she stepped back and handed the chalk to him, her expression unreadable. She turned and walked back to her cleaning supplies, leaving the room in stunned silence. The students were the first to react, whispering among themselves, exchanging glances as the weight of what had just occurred settled in. Mr. Brooks, still standing by the board, was speechless. He tried to cover it up with a forced laugh, but it didn't land. The humiliation was his, not hers. He had just underestimated someone who had far more brilliance than he ever imagined. The room remained still, the tension thick in the air. Mr. Logan Brooks stood at the front, staring at the chalkboard where Evelyn had just flawlessly solved the impossible calculus problem. His face was flushed, a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. His students, who had once been so confident in their mockery, now seemed uneasy. The laughter had died down, and the silence that followed was deafening. For a brief moment, Logan wondered if he had made a mistake. He had invited her up as a joke, a way to show the students how far removed she was from the intellectual elite. But Evelyn had proved him wrong. Completely wrong. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure, but his voice cracked when he spoke. "Well, that's impressive," he said, though it lacked any real sincerity. "But I still don't think you belong in here. You're a janitor, not a math teacher." The words felt sharp in the air, almost as if they were meant to puncture whatever small dignity Evelyn had left. His tone was cold, dismissive, everything that made him who he was, a man who couldn't fathom that someone from his world could ever be more than what their job title suggested. He quickly turned away from the board, muttering something about the next problem and trying to regain control of the class. But the damage had already been done. Evelyn, without a word, simply walked back to her cleaning cart. The mocking stares of the students followed her, but she didn't flinch. Her hands gripped the mop with a quiet strength, as though she were used to being overlooked, to being underestimated. She had learned long ago not to seek validation from people who didn't know her story, who didn't understand her struggles, but that didn't mean the sting of it all didn't cut deep. Clara Brooks, Logan's daughter, watched the entire exchange with growing discomfort. She had been sitting in the front row, a quiet observer in her father's class, when Evelyn was called up to the board. At first, Clara had laughed along with the others. After all, it was supposed to be a joke, right? But when she saw Evelyn solve the problem with such ease, her smile faltered. And when she saw her father dismiss Evelyn so callously afterward, her discomfort grew into something else entirely. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. Clara had grown up in an affluent world, surrounded by privilege, but even she could tell that there was more to Evelyn than met the eye. She had always been polite to the janitor, of course, but she had never stopped to really think about who Evelyn was beyond the job she did. That was her mistake. And now, seeing how her father had treated Evelyn, Clara felt a heavy weight in her chest. She watched as Evelyn left the classroom, her head held high despite everything that had just happened. Clara wanted to say something, to apologize for her father's behavior, but she didn't. She stayed silent, unsure of what to do. It wasn't until the bell rang, signaling the end of class, that Clara finally stood up and walked out into the hall, following Evelyn. In the hallway, Evelyn was pushing her cart down the corridor, her back straight as she cleaned up after the chaos of the morning. Clara hesitated before calling out to her. "Evelyn, wait!" Evelyn stopped but didn't turn around immediately. She could feel Clara's presence behind her. The girl was polite, maybe too polite. But it wasn't that. It was something else. Evelyn had seen her face during the class, the discomfort in her eyes as she realized the injustice of it all. Clara cleared her throat, a little unsure of how to proceed. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said softly, "for what my dad said. I know it wasn't right." Evelyn turned slowly to face her. She studied Clara for a moment, noting the sincerity in her eyes. "Thank you, but it's not your fault," Evelyn replied. "Your father, well, he's entitled. It's not surprising." Clara looked down at the ground, embarrassed. "But still, it wasn't fair. I don't think you should be treated like that. You're obviously so much more than what people think." Evelyn gave a small, knowing smile. People see what they want to see. Most don't bother looking deeper. Clara stood there for a moment, her mind racing. She had never thought about Evelyn like this before. never even considered the fact that the woman who cleaned her classroom might have been someone who could solve calculus problems with ease, someone who could have been her teacher if life had been kinder. It was a sobering realization. "I'll be honest with you," Evelyn continued, her voice soft but firm. "I've spent most of my life being invisible to people like your father, but that's okay. I've learned to keep my head down, to do the work that needs doing, and move on. I don't need anyone's approval. Not anymore." Clara nodded slowly, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this conversation, was important. She knew she couldn't let it go. She had to do something. The next few days passed in a blur, but Clara couldn't forget the conversation she had with Evelyn, and neither could she forget what happened in her father's class. She watched as her dad, still uncomfortable after the incident, tried to avoid acknowledging Evelyn's genius. He had been so sure of himself, so confident that he could embarrass her, and yet now he was the one who was embarrassed. And that, in itself, was an irony that Clara couldn't ignore. The days after the classroom incident felt heavy. For Evelyn, life continued as it always had. She swept the halls, cleaned the restrooms, and made sure the classrooms were in perfect order. But each step felt different now. Her quiet dignity felt like a silent rebellion against the ignorance that surrounded her. No one knew the depth of her knowledge, her story, the life she had lived before the mops and the buckets. But she wasn't angry about it. She had long accepted that people like her weren't meant to be seen. They were only meant to be useful. But Evelyn had a secret. She wasn't just useful. She was brilliant. On the other hand, Clara couldn't shake the growing unease she felt. Every time she walked past the janitor's closet, she found herself wondering about Evelyn. What was her story? How did someone like her, who could solve complex calculus problems without breaking a sweat, end up working as a janitor? Clara couldn't stop thinking about the stark contrast between Evelyn's brilliance and the life she was forced to live, a life that was defined by assumptions and stereotypes, not potential. It didn't sit right with Clara. Something inside her was stirring, and she knew she couldn't just go on with her life as if nothing had happened. She had to learn more. She had to understand. One afternoon, Clara gathered the courage to go back to the janitor's closet. She stood outside for a moment, hesitating, then knocked gently on the door. Inside, Evelyn was folding some towels, her back to the door. She didn't hear Clara's knock, so when Clara opened it slightly, Evelyn looked up, startled. "Oh, Miss Brooks," Evelyn said, her voice kind. "Did you need something?" Clara smiled awkwardly, stepping into the small, cluttered room. I wanted to talk, if you don't mind." Evelyn nodded, motioning for her to sit on one of the empty chairs in the corner of the room. Clara sat down, feeling slightly out of place. This wasn't the classroom. This wasn't the world she was used to, but it felt important. "I just wanted to apologize again," Clara began, her words slow. "I know it doesn't change anything, but what happened in my dad's class, it was wrong. I don't know how I never noticed before, but I've been thinking about it a lot. How could someone like you, someone who obviously has so much knowledge and talent, end up working as a janitor? It doesn't seem fair." Evelyn paused for a moment, her hands resting on the towels. She wasn't angry, though Clara feared she might be. Instead, Evelyn gave a soft sigh, one that seemed to carry years of unspoken pain. "Life isn't always fair, Miss Brooks," she said quietly. "You're right. I could have been more. I could have done more. But sometimes things don't turn out the way we hope. People like me, we get forgotten. We get overlooked. People assume that because we work jobs like cleaning floors, we don't have anything else to offer. That's a mistake. Clara's heart tightened. She could see now how much Evelyn had been holding in, how much she had buried over the years just to get by. The words she spoke weren't just about calculus. They were about the system that had failed her, the world that never saw her for who she really was. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you show them who you are?" Clara asked, her voice soft, as if afraid of pushing too far. Evelyn smiled faintly, a bitter edge to it. And what would it have changed? People are too quick to judge, too quick to put us in boxes. I don't need them to see me. I just need to survive. Clara sat quietly, absorbing her words. She was struck by how matter-of-fact Evelyn was about it all. There was no bitterness, no anger, just acceptance. But deep down, Clara could tell that it wasn't just acceptance. It was resignation. The weight of that realization settled in Clara's chest. She had never realized how much power a single act of kindness or cruelty could carry. In just a few minutes, Evelyn had completely shifted her perspective. It wasn't about a single math problem solved on a chalkboard. It was about a lifetime of being unseen, a lifetime of being dismissed and overlooked. Clara wanted to do something. She wanted to fix it, to show Evelyn that she wasn't just some janitor, that she was a woman of incredible worth. But she wasn't sure how. I want to help," Clara said, her voice filled with determination. "I don't know how, but I want to make things right. I can't let people treat you like this. Like you're invisible. You deserve better." Evelyn gave a small, amused smile. "There's nothing you can do, Miss Brooks. Life doesn't work that way. People like me don't get the opportunities that people like you do. I've learned that." Clara's hands balled into fists at her sides. "But that's not right. People should see you for who you really are. You don't belong in the shadows. You're not just a janitor, Evelyn. You're a genius." Evelyn's expression softened, but she didn't respond immediately. The weight of Clara's words hung in the air, a heavy promise of change, a promise that Evelyn wasn't sure she could ever believe in. She had been overlooked for too long. Clara stood up, her mind made up. She couldn't sit idly by any longer. "Tomorrow I'm going to talk to my dad," Clara said, her voice firm. "I'm going to make him see you, and I'm going to make him understand who you really are." Evelyn shook her head gently, though there was a glint of something like hope in her eyes. "You don't have to do that, Clara. Just go back to your life and leave things the way they are." But Clara was already on her way out the door. "No," she said. "Things are going to change." The next morning, Clara woke up early, her mind already racing with the conversation she'd had with Evelyn. It wasn't just about making Evelyn's brilliance known. It was about fixing the system that had allowed people like her to be overlooked for so long. It wasn't fair. She couldn't just stand by and pretend that the world was fine when it clearly wasn't. She knew what she had to do. The idea had been slowly forming in her mind the night before, but now, standing in front of her mirror, adjusting her uniform, she realized just how much was riding on this. She had to speak up, for Evelyn, for every person who had been silenced by the weight of others' assumptions. Clara had always been a quiet, diligent student. She did what was expected of her. She followed the rules. But today, everything was different. Today, she was going to challenge the rules. As the school day went on, Clara felt a strange sense of determination bubbling inside her. She passed by her classmates, who were oblivious to the conversation that had altered her perspective. They were caught up in their own small worlds, completely unaware of the injustice that had been playing out right in front of them. But Clara wasn't like them anymore. She couldn't go back to being passive. She had a purpose now. At lunch, Clara found herself sitting at the back of the cafeteria, a seat away from her usual group of friends. She was distracted, her mind consumed with what she was about to do. She pulled out her phone and hesitated before dialing her father's number. Her father, Richard Brooks, was a powerful man, a businessman who had built his wealth through years of hard work and connections. He owned several companies, including the prestigious school that Clara attended. She had grown up in this world, surrounded by privilege and opportunities. But that was also the problem. People like her, people with money and influence, didn't understand the struggles of those like Evelyn. The phone rang, and Clara's heart pounded in her chest. It felt strange to call her father with something so personal, but she knew this was something she had to do. "Hello?" her father answered, his voice calm and professional as always. "Dad, it's Clara," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to talk to you about something important." Richard's tone softened immediately. "Of course, Clara. What's going on?" Clara paused for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. This wasn't going to be easy. She knew her father. He didn't like to be challenged, especially by his own daughter. But she had to speak up. "It's about the janitor," she said, her words coming out faster than she intended. "Her name is Evelyn, and she's not just a janitor. She's brilliant, Dad. She's a genius. And I don't think anyone here, especially you, sees that." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Clara held her breath, waiting for her father's response. "You're talking about the woman who cleans the school?" Richard asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Clara, I don't have time for these kinds of distractions. I'm running a business, not a charity." Clara felt a pang of frustration, but she pushed it down. She couldn't back down now. "I know you don't see it, but you're wrong," she said, her voice more forceful now. "Evelyn is more than just the person who sweeps the floors. She has a gift, and it's been ignored for far too long. You know as well as I do that people like her are pushed aside, never given a chance to show who they really are." Richard didn't respond immediately. Clara could hear him shifting in his chair on the other end of the line, as if he was processing what she had said. Finally, he spoke. "Clara, I understand that you want to help, but this isn't something we can fix just by talking about it. People like Evelyn don't belong in our world. They have their place, and we have ours." Clara's heart sank. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This wasn't her father. That it wasn't the man she had always looked up to. "No, Dad," she said, her voice trembling now with emotion. "That's the problem. People like Evelyn don't have a place. They don't fit into the neat little boxes we've created. They're forced into the shadows, while the rest of us take all the credit for things we never even earned. This is bigger than just Evelyn. This is about what we're allowing to happen to people who deserve so much more." She was silent for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. Richard's silence was deafening. "I don't expect you to understand right away, but I'm not backing down," Clara continued. "I'm going to make sure Evelyn gets the recognition she deserves. And I need you to support me, or I'm going to go to someone who will." There was another long pause, and Clara could hear her father's deep sigh on the other end of the line. "All right, Clara," he said finally, his voice resigned. I'll look into it. But don't expect this to be an easy thing. It's not going to change overnight. Clara's heart raced. I don't need it to change overnight. I just need you to see Evelyn for who she really is. Richard didn't reply. He simply hung up the phone. Clara stared at the screen for a long moment, her mind spinning. Had she done the right thing? Had she pushed too hard? She wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let this go. She had started something, and now there was no turning back. The next few days were tense. Clara's mind was occupied by the promise she had made to Evelyn, the promise to make her seen. But it wasn't easy. Her classmates still treated Evelyn like she was invisible, and the teachers continued to see her as nothing more than a janitor. It was as if Clara's words had no impact at all. But Clara was determined. She knew it wasn't enough to just ask her father for help. She had to take things into her own hands. Clara couldn't sleep that night. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, all centered around the promise she had made to Evelyn. It wasn't enough to simply speak out, to make a phone call. She needed to take action. She couldn't stand the thought of watching another brilliant person like Evelyn be overlooked, shoved aside because of something as trivial as their job title. The next morning, Clara arrived at school earlier than usual. She'd already made up her mind. She wasn't just going to talk to her father or sit back and hope things would change. She was going to make the world see Evelyn for what she was, a genius, a force to be reckoned with. Clara walked down the hallway with purpose, passing the familiar faces of her classmates. Some greeted her casually, but her mind was elsewhere. She was already planning her next move. She finally reached the janitor's closet, where Evelyn usually started her morning. Clara knocked softly on the door, and after a moment, it creaked open, revealing Evelyn, who was in the midst of organizing her cleaning supplies. "Clara, what are you doing here so early?" Evelyn asked, a smile crossing her face. "I need your help," Clara said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "I've been thinking about what you said, the thing about being underestimated. I want to help change that." Evelyn looked confused, but Clara quickly added, "I know you don't want the attention, but I think the world needs to know who you really are. You're a genius, Evelyn. You deserve recognition. I won't stop until they see you for what you truly are." Evelyn's expression softened, but there was a hint of reluctance. "Clara, you don't need to do this. I'm fine. I don't want anyone to make a big deal out of it. I just want to do my job and go home." But Clara was determined. "I understand that you don't want to be in the spotlight, but I can't just watch you stay in the shadows. I've seen what you can do, and I won't let you hide your talent any longer. It's not just about you anymore. It's about everyone like you who's been overlooked their whole life." Evelyn seemed to consider this for a moment, her gaze dropping to the floor. Then, with a sigh, she looked back up at Clara. "Okay, Clara. If you really want to do this, I won't stop you. But I can't promise anything will change." Clara smiled, her heart swelling with hope. "I'll make sure it changes." Later that day, Clara made a bold decision. She was going to invite Evelyn to speak at the school's annual talent showcase, a big event that the entire school attended. It wasn't a platform for janitors, for people who were invisible, but Clara wasn't about to let that stop her. If Evelyn wouldn't take the chance herself, Clara was going to force the issue. The talent showcase was coming up in a week. Clara had no time to waste. She immediately went to her school's principal, Mrs. Hammond, and asked if Evelyn could be given a chance to present her work. At first, Mrs. Hammond was taken aback. "Clara, you know this is an event for students, right?" she asked. "We usually don't invite staff to perform." Clara stood her ground. "I know, but Evelyn isn't just staff. She's one of the smartest people here, and no one knows it. It's not right. Please give her a chance to show everyone what she can do." Mrs. Hammond gave her a long look, clearly uncertain. "Clara, I can't just let anyone perform at the showcase. It's a big deal. You're talking about a janitor here." Clara's face hardened, and she refused to back down. "I don't care if she's a janitor. She's brilliant, and she deserves the chance to show it. If you don't let her speak, you'll be making the same mistake everyone's been making for years." The room was silent for a long moment, and Clara felt the weight of her words hanging in the air. Finally, Mrs. Hammond sighed. "All right, I'll give her a chance. But this is on you if it doesn't go well." Clara's heart soared. "Thank you. I won't let you down." The days leading up to the talent showcase felt like a blur. Clara spent every free moment talking to Evelyn, preparing her for the big day. She knew Evelyn was nervous, but Clara refused to let her back out. She reminded her again and again, this wasn't just for Evelyn. It was for everyone who had ever been silenced. The night of the showcase arrived, and Clara could hardly contain her excitement. She and Evelyn stood in the wings, watching as students presented their various talents. There were singers, dancers, and even a few magicians, but Clara's attention never wavered from Evelyn. Finally, it was Evelyn's turn. She walked up to the podium, her hands shaking slightly. The entire auditorium fell silent, waiting for her to speak. Clara stood at the edge of the stage, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this was it. Evelyn was about to show the world what she had kept hidden for far too long. Evelyn stood at the podium, her fingers gripping the edges slightly as she took in the sea of faces before her. The auditorium was packed, the students, teachers, and staff all waiting to see what this janitor had to offer. Clara stood nervously off to the side, hoping Evelyn would have the courage to show them who she really was. For a moment, Evelyn hesitated. Her mind raced with doubts. What if they laugh at me? What if they don't take me seriously? But then she glanced at Clara, who was standing there, beaming with unwavering support. Evelyn drew in a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and began. "I'm Evelyn," she started, her voice steady but quiet. "Some of you might recognize me as the janitor here at Riverside High. But what you don't know about me is that I've spent most of my life studying things most of you would never expect a janitor to understand. I'm a mathematician. I'm a scientist. I have degrees that I earned before life took me in a different direction. But I chose to work here, and that choice didn't make me any less capable or intelligent." There was a ripple of surprise in the room. The students exchanged curious glances, and some of the teachers looked uncomfortable. But Evelyn didn't falter. She continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I've spent years working behind the scenes, cleaning your classrooms, making sure the hallways are spotless. But all that time, I've been studying, analyzing, and learning. And today, I'm going to share something with you that most people don't even realize I'm capable of. Something that will show you who I really am." Clara watched as Evelyn paused, looking down at the notes she had written out. She had written a complex problem on the board, a problem that even the best students at Riverside would find difficult to solve. It was a beautiful, intricate equation, a true work of genius. Evelyn's eyes glinted with determination. The crowd leaned in, mesmerized by the simplicity and complexity of the equation on the board. Evelyn didn't wait for applause, nor did she care if anyone doubted her. She picked up a marker and began solving the equation, explaining each step clearly and with the kind of precision that could only come from a true expert. As she reached the final steps, the room was dead silent. Everyone in the audience was entranced by her intellect, watching in awe as she completed the equation with ease. Evelyn's hands shook slightly as she finished, but her eyes sparkled with pride. "There," she said, stepping back from the board and turning to face the audience. "That's the solution." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the room erupted in applause. Clara clapped the hardest, her heart bursting with joy. She could see the disbelief on the faces of students who had once seen Evelyn only as the janitor. Now they saw her as the brilliant woman she truly was. Evelyn's cheeks flushed as she glanced around the room, her mind still reeling from what had just happened. She had done it. She had stood before all of them and proved her worth, and in doing so she had reclaimed the power she had always held within herself, but never dared to show the world. As the applause continued, Clara made her way to the stage, her eyes bright with tears. She hugged Evelyn tightly, a tear escaping her own eye. "You did it! You showed them!" Evelyn smiled, her eyes moist but glowing with relief. "I never thought I'd get a chance to do that. Thank you, Clara. I don't know what I would have done without you." As Evelyn left the stage, the crowd continued to cheer, many of them already discussing her brilliance in hushed tones. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt seen. She felt appreciated. And for the first time, she knew that she wasn't just the janitor. She was so much more. In the days that followed, things started to change. Evelyn's story spread throughout the school, and soon she was being recognized not just by the students, but by the staff as well. Her brilliance didn't just change how others saw her, it changed how she saw herself. Clara's determination to help Evelyn had sparked a chain reaction. Students began approaching her, asking for tutoring, wanting to learn from the woman who had proven that titles didn't define intelligence or worth. Evelyn was no longer just a face in the background. She was a mentor, a teacher, and an inspiration. But the most important thing that had changed wasn't the accolades or the recognition. It was the relationship between Clara and Evelyn. They had formed an unbreakable bond, one built on respect, kindness, and the belief that everyone deserved a chance to shine, no matter where they came from. As Clara walked with Evelyn down the school hallways one afternoon, the students who passed by no longer saw just the janitor. They saw the woman who had changed their lives by simply being herself. Evelyn smiled at Clara, her heart full. "Thank you," Evelyn said quietly, her voice full of gratitude. "You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself." Clara smiled back. "You always had it in you, Evelyn. I just made sure you didn't hide it anymore." And as they continued walking down the hallway, Clara knew that no matter what happened, she had helped make a difference in Evelyn's life. And that was something that no one could ever take away.